Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Amanda Show. Now, as always, exciting things have been going on the continent, and I want us to delve into this topic to discuss how they affect Africa, Africa's present, and even Africa's future. So, the biggest news story that came out this week is the China Africa Forum that just took place. In during the forum, Xi Jinping, that's the president of China, has committed to providing $50 billion to to African countries within the next 3 years. So I want us to delve into the China Africa Forum, look at it, and discuss how what happened in Beijing affects our amazing continent. So from there, we'll go to Europe. Now, Denmark just announced that it's going to beef up its diplomatic missions in Africa. It's going to open some new ones, strengthen some others, and close missions in Burkina Faso and Mali. One of the things that I want to discuss this story is because the Foreign Ministry of Denmark actually said something I think is very important. It said that Africa foreign policy with Africa is one of the most important decisions of the century. And I want us to look into that statement that the Foreign Ministry of Denmark made to see if this is this really true. And finally, we'll end this episode of the Amanda Show with none other than Bill Gates. Apparently, he came to Nigeria for is it a Nutrivision? Let me check. Yes, he came to Nigeria for the Nutrivision event, during which he made some interesting statements. One of which is that Nigeria needs to beef up its tax collecting procedure. In the government needs to beef up its tax collecting procedure in Nigeria, and it will not be Bill Gates without making statements about vaccine and agriculture, which is fancy for GMOs. Thank you for joining me in this episode of The Amanda Show. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and as we delve into the conversations, feel free to let me know your opinions in the comment section below. Thank you for joining me in this episode. Let's begin. Guys, interesting things have just happened in Beijing. So, China had its China Africa Forum, and 52 out of the 53 African states were present in Beijing, during which Xi Jinping gave his address. And in his address, he mentioned that he's going to, not he personally, but China is going to allocate $50 billion for development projects across Africa within the next 3 years. Now, I took a note. So, this development project is going to cover it's going to fund infrastructure. It's also covering military support, and it's going to provide 1 million jobs to Africa within the next 3 years. Then another thing he said, usually when we look at China-Africa relations, it's usually around um economic. But certain things, first of all, when I saw this military support, I'm like, wow, because usually, although China is also a player in military support in Africa, but it's not like the top dogs. When it comes to African military support, the top dogs, United States and Russia. In fact, Russia is even more in certain African nations because I believe that Russia's weapons are more affordable than American weapons. So anyway, now that China is wants to get into the military game, and so like I said, we are used to economy with China's relationship with Africa, but now I'm seeing military support. Another interesting thing is politics. So here, this is a quote. China also mentioned, okay, not really a quote, but I wrote it down. Now, Xi Jinping also said that they are raising the relationship between all African nations that have diplomatic relations with China. They are raising this relationship to strategic relationship. This means that Africa is becoming very important in China's foreign policy now that the relationship has been raised to strategic. Do you know what it means for a country to say my relationship with you is strategic? Meaning that our futures are kind of intertwined. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. You know the way the world is moving, and particularly with this whole geopolitics conflict, not really conflict, this more geopolitics posturing where every country is trying to say, okay, you're either on my side or you're not on my side, and this is how we're going to, for example, we're going to preserve America's future. To preserve one of the episodes of the Amanda Show I had some weeks ago, I mentioned that a think tank funded by the US, by the Pentagon in the United States, suggested that for United States to get access to important graphite, it needs to take its relationship with East Africa more seriously. Do you get? Because now that the world is shifting, so every country now, particularly the big players like Russia, China, United States, these big players are beginning to look for how do we protect our future? How do we ensure that our country keeps developing and growing? So this is one of, to me, I think this is one of the reasons why China is raising its relationship with African countries to strategic. Now, like I was mentioning, the way the world is moving to not it's not completely moving, but it's beginning to incorporate elements of this whole green energy. Africa is a critical source of this energy. There is no place on the planet. There is no place on the planet that you can say like this is where I'm coming to find everything I need. Not just even if you think about it, not just with the whole green energy thing, even with our normal um I don't want to call it fossil fuels, even with our normal trusted petroleum products like crude oil and natural gas, even with those things, Africa is where you know you can you're sure you can get it. So China is doing this now because it has realized that its future, since the world is divided into pole, like in this multipolar world, what is like the world is divided into sections. China is trying to protect its own section, how to because some minerals now that China would not have, or some things that China would not have. It wants to be friends with several other places to ensure it gets uninterrupted supply of those things because United States is going to be trying to outclass or outdo China in certain areas. So this is what is going on. Now beyond that, during this China Africa forum, one of the critical issues that Africa has faced, which would now China is the biggest trade, Africa's biggest trade partner in countries mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. But I think in Africa, China's biggest trade partner is South Africa. One of the issues we've had, like one of the main issues we've had with relationship with economic relationship with China, is that our importation from China, it's not just an African thing. China is the world's manufacturing behemoth. So everything the world needs, China supplies the world with it. But looking at it in the context of Africa, our importation from China is way more than our exports to China. So to address this, the Chinese are thinking of um, opening their markets to more goods from African countries, 33 African countries, if I'm not mistaken. And of these 33 African countries, these goods are coming in, are going to come into China at zero tariff. It's a good thing. But here's where I still think that no matter what China tries to do, Africa will still kind of have a back leg. It'll still be like, it's still not going to be playing from a strong position, mostly because we do not have local production. That is with local production that you are adding value to things that are gotten from here. And it's when you add value to things that are gotten from here, you can make more money. Because even if China said, okay, we are opening our market completely to all African nations, because we are not sending out value added products, we are still going to be getting it on the cheap because we are selling just raw materials. Say we are supplying China we are supplying China with, say, we are supplying China with cobalt, for example. Even if China says, okay, 0%, no, we're not putting any tariff on this thing, no matter how much we send, we can never make up for what we get import from China because China is adding, and this is not the Chinese problem. Like, it's not all because China has so outsmarted Africa. It's because of the way African nations have run their economy since even before independence, because even when the Europeans were still in control of several Africa of all African nations, it was just the system that has been in place. So that's why now more than ever, we need to begin to we need to take this local production very seriously. And it's the same thing like earlier this year we had the South Korea Africa Forum. And during that South Korea Africa Forum, things like this were agreed that they were going to increase bilateral trade. In fact, African nations can keep bringing in more of their goods. But that's the same problem. Whatever we get from South Korea is going to be value added products. And whatever we send to South Korea is going to be raw material. So no matter what happens, African nations are still going to be playing on a back foot because we haven't set up things like this. Now more than ever, this is where we need to take it very seriously. And I'm saying this not because I've said this several on this show, not because I'm expecting that one president of an African nation is watching this show, at least not yet, or maybe I don't even know. But I'm saying it because of you who is watching me. Now is the time to take the responsibility for the development of Africa into our hands. I know things are not easy on the continent. In several countries on the continent, things are not easy, but we should move in spite of what we see on ground. Because if at all we are going to, if let every country in the world decide to open up and say, all right, give us all African goods, we don't have goods to export. Now, having said that, I also want to discuss, when I saw when this news came out, the whole world is like, wow, $50 billion is not a small thing anyway. Oh wow, $50 billion, $50 billion in 3 years for African nations, blah 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 blah, 1 million jobs and all these things. So it's more like China is beginning to look like, oh, our savior, the savior of Africa, and I don't like that. Now, I'm not saying that relationship with China is not in Africa's interest. It's in Africa's interest. We've seen that many of these infrastructure projects, even if they come out and say debt trap, I've said it before on the show, there's little evidence to prove that China is engaging in debt trap diplomacy in Africa. If there's a debt trap diplomacy taking place in Africa, it's with the IMF and the World Bank and all these Western lenders and also private lenders. That is the debt trap. So here's the thing now, like I was saying, the issue I have with this movement, with this thing, is that China is beginning to look like, oh, our savior, our knight in shining armor, the guy who is going to help Africa, the guy who is going to pull Africa out of poverty and develop Africa. China is one country. Yes, it's a rich country, and yet it has been one of Africa's friends. Even before now, even when China was not even something that nations were thinking about. It was a debt poor country. China and Africa has always had good relations. Well, I want us to. I'm saying this because I want us to look away from thinking that some guy or some country is coming to help us. No, anything that China is going to do in Africa, even if there's evidence to show that it's actually beneficial relationship, or whatever China is going to do in Africa, is not because the Chinese are philanthropists. Anything China is coming to do in Africa they are looking at it from China's interest. That is why I mentioned to you when I started this segment. That's why they said the Chinese government mentioned that they're increasing relationship with African nations, all the African nations that have diplomatic relations with China. Their relationship is increased to strategic relationship. Why? Because China is looking at it from China's perspective, from Chinese interest. How does this benefit China? So therefore, it is imperative for Africans to then look at it from Africa's interest. Don't think China is coming to pull you out of poverty. I'm saying this clearly. China will do what it can to work with African countries, and definitely the more you transact and do business, the more money you make. But it is not in China's place to bring Africa out of poverty. It's the same way. Don't look at it like Russia is coming to be a knight in shining armor. It is not in Russia's place to bring Africa out of poverty. Russia would do what is in Russia's interest. The same thing with the United States and Europe. In fact, those ones have really funny history anyway, so you cannot even be looking at them for anything. Do you get? But the most important thing I'm saying this is because Africans, we need to begin to look at ourselves and realize that the wealth and the prosperity of Africa is dependent on us. It's dependent on Africans, both the government and the people. China is not our father. China is not the father African nations run to when they need financial support. If we have been thinking of China like that, we need to begin to remove that thought from our head, because every country will work in its interest. China is here not because, oh, it so loves Africa. Mm-mm. China is here because Africa has what it needs, meaning that Africa has what China needs. That is why China is here. It's the same reason why the Russians are here. It's the same reason why the Americans are here. It's the same reason why you keep hearing that, oh, they want to engage in information, and they want to engage in propaganda. I said that in the last episode of this show. They want to engage in propaganda to paint France, United States, and really Western countries in a good light compared to other players like Russia and China. It's not because they so care about you. It's not. It's because they care about what is in your country and on the continent. So if at all we are serious about pulling Africa out of poverty, if at all we want to make Africa a formidable player on the global stage, we need to look at ourselves that we are responsible for the story of Africa. We are responsible for the wealth of Africa. And that's one of the things I love about China. You see, I look at China, and I think other Africans should begin to, particularly leaders, should begin to look at China like this. I look at China and I see what is possible. Let's not forget that just a few decades ago, it's not so long. Many of our parents were alive. Many of us were even watching this. Were alive when this thing was going on. China was a death poor nation. I remember even back then, there was a documentary I was watching some weeks ago. Yes, was it documentary or a book? No, it was a book. It's a book I'm reading. It's a book. It's not a documentary. The book is titled "Why Nations Fail." So I'm reading that book, and one important argument that the authors of that book stated is that back then, right now they tell you that Africa is poor because our culture is backward, because this is backward and that is backward, so that's why Africa is poor, blah blah blah. But here's the argument. One of the arguments that were made in that book is that when China was poor, the same thing was said about the Chinese. They said the Chinese are lazy people. They said the Chinese culture is backward. They said the Chinese culture encourages laxing and not doing anything. Oh, communism is the reason for all of China's worries and all of China's problems. That was what was said. But now that the script has flipped, and flipped by who? The Chinese made sure that the script flipped. Now that the script has flipped and China is no longer a poor nation, the whole story has changed. Oh, the Chinese are so hardworking. Oh, the Chinese are so intelligent. It's the same thing between Africa. So I'm looking at China and this country. I've not been to China, but I'm planning to travel to China hopefully sometime next year, because that's how I see this nation. I see it like this thing is possible. Coming out of poverty, even the kind that China suffered, is possible. There was nothing in China. Coming out of poverty is possible. If one of the things they even tell us that responsible for Africa's poverty is population, Africa's overpopulation, which is not true. Which is not true. Let's look at it. If we say Africa all together, all 50, 53, 53, 54 countries of Africa put together, and even those countries that are saying they are countries, but the international community does not recognize them, put all of us together. We just barely surpassed 1 billion a few years ago. A whole continent surpassed 1 billion a few years ago. So Africa does not have an overpopulation problem. Africa has an underdevelopment problem, not overpopulation problem. So sometimes when these economists say, "Oh, Africa is poor because of their population," it's not true. It's not true. The most populous nation in Africa is Nigeria. Nigeria is sitting at just 220 million, or maybe 200 million. Let's put it at that. That is what Nigeria is sitting at. When China brought its people out of poverty, how many were they? How many? They were a lot. They were several times more than Nigeria. Okay, look at India now. That India is pulling people out of poverty, and a lot more Indians are getting into the middle class. Although there's still a lot of poverty in India, but a lot more Indians are getting into the middle class. How many are they? India is 1 point something billion, because we're watching India's development right in front of us. India is 1 point something billion. Africa completely is 1 billion. Nigeria is 220 million. Now you put Nigeria's 220 million and contrast with India's 1.3 billion. If 1.3 billion can work in bringing people out of poverty, why 200 million? How is 200 million a complicated thing? Do you understand where I'm coming from? So I look at China as a very inspirational model, as a huge inspiration for Africa to see this is what is possible. So instead of we to just come out and say, "Oh, China will take all our problems away, China will come and help Africa," instead of we to take that approach, let us look at what China did in their country and say, or let's look at what the Chinese did in their country and say, how can we implement this in Africa? Because instead of us to go and be say, "Oh, give us 50 billion," we need to get to the point where it's African nations that are giving other nations money. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea that something is going on in, say, in Haiti, Dominican Republic, in the Bahamas. There's been something is going on. Why can't African nations say, "All right, we'll give you 10 billion"? Why can't it? What is wrong in Nigeria doing that? What is wrong in South Africa doing that? So this whole thing will begin with our mind. We need to begin to change our mind. It's good that we're working with China. It's good that we're working with Russia. It's good that we're working with the United States and the EU. But to not look at these nations, not one of them, not one is your knight in shining armor. Your only knight in shining armor in Africa is yourself. Africa will be built by Africans, not the Chinese, not the Americans, not the Europeans, not the Russians. So, what do you think about the China Africa forum that just took place. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends so that we reach more people across the continent. I think one important theme in this episode of the Amanda Show that I noticed when I was working on it is how Africa is really important in the world. Forget what they tell you. So, no, sometimes they just say, I've seen a lot of people say this online, particularly on X, formerly Twitter. I've seen a lot of people say this, and they tell you that Africa, oh, Africa has just been taking aid. Africans, they are freeloaders. Africans are lazy. They add nothing to the global economy. Blah 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 blah. All they do is take. Yet, when you watch how the governments move, the different nations, their governments move, nothing is further from the truth. They look at Africa like we need Africa. And I'm saying that because this second segment of this show, the Foreign Ministry of Denmark said as much. Now, let's get into the topic. Now, the Foreign Ministry of Denmark is looking to improve relations with African countries. And one of the things they are doing is they're opening more new diplomatic offices in African nations like Rwanda, Senegal, and Tanzania. Now, as they're opening up these new embassies in these African nations, they're also beefing up current embassies in Nigeria, um, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, and Ghana. What they're saying is that these new embassies, they want to beef up with new stuff, and they want to use it to explore and spread their reach across the region. So clearly, South Africa is going to the beefed up Denmark's embassy in South Africa is going to take care of Southern Africa so they can improve their relations with Southern African nations. The one in Kenya clearly is going to take care of East Africa. The one in Nigeria, obviously, West Africa. The one in Egypt, Northern Africa. So this is what Denmark is saying. Well, they are closing their embassies in Burkina Faso and Mali. Well, obviously now we already know that those nations have become well, those nations are not really the part they've taken to put it mildly. The part they've taken, they are not really friends of the West. Let me put it mildly. So they are closing their diplomatic missions in those nations. But I'm bringing this thing up because of a statement that was made by the Foreign Ministry of Denmark. One of the things, this is why I'm bringing up this. Yeah, okay, before I get to that, they're also going to that Denmark is setting up programs to bring in more students from Africa to come and learn in Denmark and maybe get jobs in Denmark after graduation. So this is a move to improve relations with African countries. Now back to that statement. I'm going to quote the Foreign Ministry of Denmark said something very interesting that I want us to discuss today. They said, one of the most important foreign policy questions of this century will be whether African countries will orient themselves more towards the East or the West. So, what I'm taking from this is that we have not realized it, but in the mind of the world, right, there is a game going on, a diplomatic game going on, and Africa is on the table. That's how I say it. It's possible that I'm reading more into it than it actually is. Very possible. But the way I'm seeing it is that there is a game going on. Africa is on the table. So the question now is, according to the Foreign Ministry of Denmark, will Africa face the West or will it face the East? My own is, why is it that Africa cannot do both? Do you get? Because in some people's minds, this just has to be is either also the other guys. I don't think so. So as the most players in the world are thinking, we want to pull Africa into a camp. We want to pull Africa into a camp. Let Africa come east. Let them come west. As they are doing that, Africa should be more interested in working for Africa's interests. Do you understand? Africa should be more interested in working for Africa's interests and work with everybody. Don't pick sides. It's always better because some people East may give better deals. Then some deals that you can get from the West, you may not get it from the East. So don't burn your bridges. Work with everybody. So as I was researching for this topic, one thing that struck out to me, like when I was reading, it was a thought that came to my mind. Like I said, that's why I said this section with this segment is what I said. Many times we tend to look at Africa as, oh, because poverty is really strong in Africa. So Africa is not something to really put your mind to. Oh, it's just exists. It's just this. It's just that. It's not really an important player. But the more I was looking at the story, it dawned on me that Africa is a very important region in the world. I'm saying to you, you African listening to me, you are a very important region in the world, and maybe even the most important. Because when you think of the most important region in global affairs, and rightly so, you may be considering United States, China, Russia. Okay, but sometimes a place like Africa that it seems like, oh, they're just their leaders, not the whole country. Their leaders are just begging for aid, help us, help us, help us. A place like Africa, you don't think it's so important. But when you watch the way global leaders move, you understand how important Africa is. I even suspect that Africa is probably the most important region in global affairs on the planet. So all that idea, all that propaganda to make you think that you are worthless, all that propaganda to make you think that you offer nothing to the world, you need to begin to remove that thing from your head. Because if you listen to what they tell you about your continent, Africa, and even Africans, when you begin to listen to what they tell you, and you will then watch how they move. It's contrary. If Africa was so worthless, if Africa added nothing to the world, if the world does not need Africa, in fact they just carry Africa just because they want to be nice and loving. If it was so, the way they run around us like bees and honey, the way they run around Africans, they will not be doing it. If something is really worthless, you leave it alone. If Africa was really worthless, they would have left us alone. But no, their businesses are here, they will not leave. Many of them are engaged in some really questionable behavior on the continent, behavior they will not engage in their own country, but they still stay here. Their politicians, they will not leave us. They will, in fact, go as far as putting puppets in our different countries to make sure that our countries give them the leaders that are favorable to them. Do you get me? And many times when it's favorable to them, it's at the detriment of the respective countries. If Africa was so worthless, the way they are running, even this China Africa summit we just saw, we will not have it. Why would the Chinese be calling African nations to come and be doing summit? Why? Because they want to spend money on summit. They don't know what they want to use their money to do. We saw the Russia Africa summit that took place last year. You think it's just because, oh, the Russians, they don't have anything they want to use their money to do. So they're calling the pesky Africans to come and have conversation. You think it's because Africa is important. And I dare say Africa is the most strategic region on the planet today. So I'm saying this so that you begin to remove all that idea. Many times we got so brainwashed and propagandized. We received a lot of that propaganda that we began to see ourselves as nothing, as inferior. Begin to remove that thing from your head, because when you see the way their leaders play on ground, it's very different from what they tell you in their media, or even the textbooks they gave us to read. It's very different. Because tell me, how many continents on the planet today can boast about growing population? How many? Around the world, everybody, the major conversation they are having in the West, even in the East, in places like Japan, South Korea, the major conversation they are having is declining population. It's a problem. Africa doesn't have that problem. How many of them can complain or can boast about such large number of able-bodied men and women, young people? In Africa, the average age, let me use Nigeria, the average Nigerian is 18 years old. I believe in Ghana is 19. Some countries in Africa, the average age you see 17, you see 15 young people. But if you look to to other parts of the world, you see average age 35. I think China is 30 something. Average age 35. You see some 38. In Japan, for example, more people die than are born. Did you hear me? I don't think you understand the gravity of this thing. In Japan has more dying people, old people who are dying from natural causes, of course. More old people are dying than babies born. You are seeing nations are beginning to, I think in South Korea is also there are some regions are paying. I think South Korea, but I'm not exactly sure. But I'm thinking in South Korea, where the government is even doing matchmaking and encouraging people, new couple, to move to rural areas and start focus on family. They are paying you. Just come and have family. Will pay you. In Russia, the government is giving benefits to families that have more than 3 children. So some certain taxes that you pay is reduced. Why? Just to encourage people to have more children. But we in Africa, we have them plenty. No region in the world, few regions in the world can boast about this thing. Why do you think no the conversation we're having now, why do you think Denmark is saying, oh please come, your students should come? Because they are hoping that when the students come, some of them will stay. And when they stay, they mingle with the society, they assimilate into the society and become part of them and have babies. That way they can boost their workforce. You think that Canada is doing um this thing that Canada is doing, that we should for permanent residency. You think Canada is doing it just because, oh, they just want to help Africans? You think? No. Canada is doing it because Canada has an aging population. The land is not full. Many places are empty. So they're bringing in people that will add to their economy, that will add to their growth, but they're bringing in people to make up for the places that are falling short. But we have that thing in Africa. Our population should be our pride. But if it's a population of poor people, that's where the problem is. That's really where the problem is, because a population of poor people, it might as well be a nuisance. You get? But we don't have that problem here. That's number one. Number two, our resources critical. They keep telling Africa has not added anything to the world. The iPhones that all these people are using. Where do you think they get the resources to make them? What do you think? Do you understand me? So with all these benefits Africa has given to us by God naturally, no nation can dare to ignore Africa. Tell them when there was someone I that was some I think it was last year. And the person was doing this normal talking down on Africa and the rest and like they do. And the person was like, oh, Africa has added nothing to the world. Africa offers nothing, blah blah blah. Oh, every time you ask for aid, blah blah. And I said, I dare you to tell your leaders to leave our countries. I dare you. I dare you. You think that France, after kicking them out of Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, you think they're happy? You're seeing them run now to Madagascar. I dare them to leave. If Africa is so bad, they should get out. They cannot. So I'm saying this not because of them. They already realize it. I'm saying it because of you. All that lies you have been told. The Africans are worthless. The Africa offers nothing to the world. And you know the story, you know the line already. Take it and remove it from your head. Remove it from your head because it's a lie. Instead, by the time you watch the way these outsiders move, by the time you watch the way they move, you will have pride in you take pride in your respective country, you take pride in the continent, and then you put your heart to transforming the story of this continent. I'm telling you. So I don't have an issue. The Foreign Ministry of Denmark has clearly told you that where Africa decides to face is the most important conversation in foreign policy of the century, to show you how important you are. That's what they just told us, how important you are. Let me know what you think about this development with them. I welcome Denmark. I really don't have an issue with them. But I'm saying this so that you would realize that the China Africa Forum that just happened, this Denmark adjusting things and strengthening their diplomatic missions in Africa is not because if you were so unimportant, they would not be doing these things. So I brought this topic today so that you see how important Africa is. And that means how important you are. And that should make you throw your cap, throw your weight, throw your everything into this fight to bring Africa out of poverty. Let me know what you think about this development in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends and families so that we can reach more people across Africa. As we are insisting that this country, this continent, our respective countries, we are going to develop it, we are going to transform it, and we are going to make it a global envy. What the Chinese did, and the whole world said, wow, Africa, we can do much more. And the whole world will shout even a bigger wow. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you so much for joining me. Mr. Bill Gates came to Nigeria, and I want to start by saying this segment. I want to be honest. I don't trust Bill Gates. No, the way he runs around Africa, the way he runs around Nigeria, I do not trust Bill Gates. Anyway, so he came to Nigeria for the Nutrivision event and he spoke. First of all, the first thing that okay, what I would do is I would just mention everything that he said, like mention some key points from his statement, and then I will give my opinion about these things. First, he said that our tax collection is very low in the region, that is West Africa, and even on the continent. The Nigeria's tax collection is, I think he said, is 10 point something percent. That is very low. So he's urging the government to improve the way they collect taxes from Nigeria. That is number one. Number two, he also mentioned that, of course, it will not be Bill Gates if he does not go into health and agriculture. He also mentioned that 2.2 million Nigerians have not received vaccine, and 3,000 naira per person is allocated annually for health. Thirdly, he said that we should embrace innovative crop varieties with higher yields and greater pest resistance to address the issue of food scarcity, blah 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 blah. Then he also said we need to speed up, Nigeria needs to speed up regulatory process to approve new crop varieties. So now Bill Gates, with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they've invested over $2.3 billion in Nigeria in the course of operating in the country. So these are the key points from his statement. Now I want to say what I have to say. Firstly, I've said it before, I'm saying it again. I do not trust Bill Gates for anything. Yes, I'm of that group. After 2020, there is no, I have no trust, I have no respect for Bill Gates. So yet, so you may hear it in my tone, you may hear the sentiment in what I'm going to say. That's the first thing. Secondly, about our tax collecting process. Mr. Bill Gates, who asked you? You know, I do. This is something that I always wonder. When I hear people like Bill Gates say, for instance, I hear people like Bill Gates say, "Oh, that the world population is too much. That they need to reduce the world population because we cannot feed all these people." My question is, who asked you to feed them? When God made the world, all these things were existing before you. Are you the person who gives approval for the plants to grow? Are you the person who gives approval for the cows and the chickens to mate and reproduce? Are you the person who gives approval? So who asks you? I really don't understand this thing. Did the whole world come to Bill Gates to say, please, the whole world is from North America to South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, the Oceania, the whole world is hungry. Mr. Bill Gates, please feed the world. Who asked you? That the world population is going out of hand, that the food, I'm behind this thing for a long time, but that's not what I want to discuss. And the food is so, we will not be able to feed the people. Did anybody ask Bill Gates to feed the people? So it's the same thing I'm looking at in this thing. You say Nigeria's tax collection is low. Who asked you? Did anybody ask Bill Gates to give us money to fund the country? When he came here, he said he's coming to do philanthropic work. Did we beg him to come? He on his own, he sat down where he was when the idea came to him. He now decided, yes, it's a good thing. I must come to Nigeria to do so-called philanthropy work. Yes, I must come to Nigeria to do philanthropy work. Okay, we did not ask him. We did not beg him. He then came to Nigeria and said, I will run this philanthropy work. And he said, I will fund the philanthropy work. And he did everything he wants to do. Now he's coming to tell us that the government cannot run without taking more tax. Did we ask you when you came here first? Did anybody ask you for anything? Did you not come by yourself? So what is your business with our tax collecting? When did you become Bill Gates the tax collector? That is number one. People this government is telling to improve because Nigeria is at a very critical juncture. I think more it's more glaring in Nigeria than any other country in Africa. Nigeria is at a very critical juncture. We need to get it right now. I'm telling you, if the way things are going continue, the way things are positioned, it continues, Nigeria can explode. And it will drag the whole continent down because we have the largest population. There are a lot of things we have that makes us like a top player on the continent. It will drag the whole continent down. So the progress of Nigeria is in the benefit of the whole continent. I said that to say this. Nigeria is at a very critical juncture right now because the debt This for the first time in Nigeria. I think the last time it happened was in 2001. Nigeria's debt to GDP just crossed 50%. Sometimes you see that the government of Nigeria spent 100% of revenue in a year servicing debt. So by the time they spend all that money servicing debt, there's nothing left to do development projects within the country. So Bill Gates coming to tell us. So clearly the people are poor. In the last like 8 years, Nigeria, if yes, in the last 8 years, Nigeria fell into multi-dimensional poverty. Nigeria became the poverty capital of the world. This is the people that Bill Gates is saying to collect more tax from. When he was having that, did he sit down with the government officials in that place? Did he sit down to ask them the tax that are being paid already? What are they used for? Did he sit down to ask them? When the Nigerian government, Tinubu, was going to buy private jets, what billions? I think it was $150 million, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure. I need to verify that. What tens of billions or maybe hundreds of billions of naira? Did he come to tell Tinubu that that was a bad move, that he needs to put money into the educational sector, into the health sector, into the agricultural sector, into the development of the country? Did he? No. No, of course he did not. You see, sometimes here, I really wonder if, because I see so much evidence to prove that, like so much evidence to prove that it's happening, that I'm wondering why it's not really a big topic in the world. I think that all these so-called philanthropists, NGOs, and billionaires, and these international institutions, I think sometimes they work together. Because the same thing that IMF is saying in Nigeria, Bill Gates will come and echo it. Another billionaire will come and echo it. One NGO, maybe a civil society NGO, will come and say it. It's like these people, I think they're in the same WhatsApp group. And they are sharing message with each other. Because I don't understand. If you say the tax collecting something is poor, look at the state of the people that you want to tax. From last year to this year, in the space of 1 year, because of the policies implemented by the current administration in Nigeria, more Nigerians have gone into poverty. More businesses have shut down. The policies like removing fuel subsidy, the policies like floating the naira, policies like increasing electricity tariff, all these policies blessed by the and increasing tax by the way, all these policies blessed by the IMF. All these policies have pushed more Nigerians into poverty in the space of 1 year. On average, food that maybe something that used to cost say 100 naira is now like 400 naira. Fuel, petrol that here you were buying for 145 naira. It's now 1,200 naira. Nigeria has crude oil. Nigeria is Africa's largest producer of crude oil. We are selling fuel in Nigeria for 1,200 naira as I do this video. Do you understand? Bill Gates did not think of it. It did not occur to Mr. Bill Gates. Onyoma CY. It did not occur to Mr. Bill Gates. So when this administration came into power, we were complaining because the last administration left the exchange rate dollar to naira. I think it was 700 and something naira to $1. Because when he came, that was Buhari. Buhari campaigned that why is $1 200 naira? It was one of his campaign issues. He said naira and dollar should not be that. $1 should not be equivalent to 200 naira. He came into office and left office. It was not at 200. Buhari left it at 700 plus. Between last year of Tinubu came in May 29th. Between last year of Tinubu and today, this is September, September 7th. Yes. Between May 29th last year and September 7th, Tinubu took the naira to dollar, took it from 700 and something. As we speak, is 1,600. Businesses are struggling to cope. Mr. Bill Gates did not think of that. He came here to tell us to increase tax. Anyway, that's number one. I don't want to delve because that is very upsetting, but I don't want to delve into it. That's number one. Number two. So if Bill Gates wants to give advice to Nigeria's government and Tinubu, he should start by telling them to improve the economic standing, the economic livelihood of Nigerians. Once Nigerians get richer, then you can begin to have the conversation of taxes. Because how do you tax poor people? Bill Gates, how do you tax poor people? Please explain to me. How do you tax poor people? What do you want to squeeze out of them? You're saying that the government needs to find more alternative source of income, and the source of income that the government should take to make the government rich to do certain things is to tax the people. See, you get a government of poor people cannot expect to be rich. If your people are poor, the government is poor. The government is a reflection of the people. If the people are poor, you say the government doesn't have money because the people don't have money. The more money that the Nigerian government insists gets into the hands of Nigerians, the more money the Nigerian government is going to see. It's as simple as that. Secondly, Bill Gates said that that Nigeria needs to do more with vaccination. That there are about 2.2 million Nigerians who are unvaccinated. Let I tell you what I think. I'm like, I did not know this thing was so low. Because if you had asked me, I would have put it somewhere in the tens of millions who are unvaccinated. Like maybe like, yeah, 9 million, 10 million unvaccinated. But Bill Gates just told me that out of Nigeria's 220 million population, only 2.2 million are unvaccinated. That means his foundation has really done a good job. In all these years of working in Nigeria, he has done a very good job. That is only 2.2 million. Interesting. Now, the third thing I want to talk about. Bill Gates also said that Nigeria needs to embrace innovative crop varieties. Embrace innovative crop, that the underline that word innovation. He said Nigeria needs to embrace innovative crop varieties. And he also said that Nigeria needs to speed up regulatory process to approve new crop varieties. All these things are fancy words for GMO. All these innovative crop varieties is fancy word for GMO. Under Tinubu, Nigeria, for the first time in its history, Nigeria approved the sale of GMO crops. Tinubu approved it in Nigeria. And that sale is that's what's the, that's organization, the business, the scientific project of these crops is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So Bill Gates is going to make money. The more GMO crops that Nigeria buys from Bill Gates is going to make money. They said it's resistance to pests. Okay. They said it to ensure. Did they tell you that some of these GMOs that once you eat it, you cannot plant it back? The way God works, the way God made the earth to function, is that whatever you eat, you can plant the seed and get much more, which is supposed to be self-sustenance. But this GMO, once you eat it, is gone. Like those seedless oranges and seedless grapes that we eat. Sometimes I wonder, how did they plant it? Do you get me? Or if you plant it, maybe it can only be planted once. After it's planted once, you need to buy more. You get is funding some of these organizations that are producing these GMOs. So when it's coming to Nigeria to tell us that we need to embrace innovative crop varieties, he's telling you that he needs more money in his pocket. Like you get did not spend. Let me figure how much is that again? Over $2.3 billion because he likes Nigeria. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. He did not spend over $2 billion because he likes Nigeria. Or maybe his middle name is Nigeria. He did not do it. Do you understand? Did he also tell this Nigerian government that he's telling our leaders to speed up the regulation of new, because that corn one is not enough for him. Now they want you to speed up the regulation on for approval of new crop varieties. Did he tell you of all the scientific studies that are showing that we human beings should run away from GMOs? Did he tell you? Did he tell you of the cancer that is a cancer reports of cancer and several other health issues associated with consuming GMOs? He did tell you. You think he's in Nigeria because he likes you. You think he's in Nigeria. Someone that came out on yes, I want to say someone that came out online. I will look for that video to find to so I could show you, but I can't find it yet. Anyway, someone that came out to say that the population of the world is going all the way like this. That and the so something it needs to come closer to zero. He came out and he said, and people were clapping like seals. People in the audience were clapping. He said it about human beings that it needs to come closer to zero. Population of the world needs to come closer to zero. And it's coming to give you GMO to eat. GMOs that the reports, the research, the evidence, a lot has shown that we should run away from it. I believe Mexico even just banned um I think it was Mexico, even just banned the GMO corn from the United States. Mexico said no, no more. But they're coming to give it to you in Africa. And you say, yes, give me. I think other than Nigeria, the only other African country that has approved the sale of that GMO corn is South Africa. South Africa did it first. The rest, all the other African countries, are they stupid? They don't know what it is. They don't know. And with this Tinubu administration, all the people that came before you and they were telling them to approve GMO corn in their country, all those ones that came before you, they did not know about the GMO. They didn't know that the reason they did not approve it is it because of stupidity. I'm shouting this thing now. Don't think for a second. Don't think for a second, Nigerians. Don't think for a second that Bill Gates has been. This is like his third time in this country since last year. Since last year, in the space of 1 year, if I am not mistaken, Bill Gates has come to Nigeria this 3 or 4 times. This might be the third or the fourth time. You think it's because he likes you? Or you think because his mother was Nigerian? Is that what you think? Oh, I just so love the country. Is that what you think? Don't deceive yourself. You see, poverty does a lot of nonsense. I think one of the most dehumanizing things is poverty. Poverty is one of the most dehumanizing things in the world. I'm just imagining Bill Gates going to China to tell them this nonsense. Maybe at one time he could have told it to the Chinese, but not this China today. Not this China. Or does he want to go to Russia to tell them this nonsense? Even that United States, his country, will he come out so openly to say this thing? Will he? Will he? See, let me tell you the thing, Africa. Nigeria, Africa, let me tell you the thing. The most one of the one of the most assured ways of preserving yourself and preserving your future is to be rich. I'm telling you. If the way the world functions, people take advantage of poor people. They take advantage of poor nations. This world, everybody will say human rights. It's not. I said it before. I'm saying it again. Human rights does not exist with these players that we see in the world. Many of these people are very nefarious players. They are bad faith actors. And the most important way to preserve your country, to preserve the lives of your people, to preserve your future and your destiny, ah, the most the most dependable way to do that is to be rich, to be economically powerful, to be militarily powerful. Don't be a poor country. If not for anything, if not because you want to make Nigeria prosperous and Africa prosperous, if not for anything, to say this is our form of self-preservation. This is the same Bill Gates that came out to tell us, or his foundation, or even his ex-wife, came out to tell us during COVID that Africans will be falling and be dying on the streets. It's the person that you want to collect corn from to eat. Okay, okay. A weak nation will always be taken advantage of. Nobody's going to do anything for you because they like you. It's not true. That's not the way politics works. That's not the way global relations work. Everybody's coming, whether it's for self-interest or whether it's just because they need the things that you have, and you're just an inconvenience on the area. This is me trying to put it really nicely. Certain things you have, they want it, and you being there is an inconvenience for them. Let me know what you think about Bill Gates not minding his business and coming to Nigeria to tell us to increase tax, to give more vaccines, and to eat GMO, to eat and get more GMO crops. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends and your family so that we can reach more people across the continent as we are trying to wake Africans up for the people to know the way the world is. Alright, guys, that's it. That's all we are covering in this episode of the Amanda Show, from the China Africa Forum to Denmark strengthening its diplomatic mission across Africa, and even Bill Gates coming to tell Nigerians to take more GMOs, take more vaccines, and increase tax. Let me know what you think about all these topics in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share these videos with your friends and family so that we reach more people across the continent. Thank you for joining me in this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.